Let's move on to our next guest speaker. For those that live and work in Cumbria, Colin Cox really doesn't need much of an introduction. During the pandemic, Colin became a well-recognised figure in our households as he appeared so frequently on our TV screens. I bet when Colin took up his position as Cumbria's Director of Public Health back in April 2014, is it that long, Colin, 2014? He never thought that he'd actually have to deal with so many major challenges on his DPH watch as he has done to date. First, there were devastating storms. Latterly, we've had the COVID pandemic. And now we have a cost of living crisis. I suspect we'll continue to see him on our TV screens for some time to come. As DPH for Cumbria, Colin chairs many networks, groups, and official bodies. Additionally, he's been a long-standing member of the Active Cumbria Advisory Board and supporting the work of Active Cumbria team. And both myself and Richard Johnston, senior managers at Active Cumbria, we've really greatly appreciated and valued his direct line management support over the past 8 years. So it gives me great pleasure to invite Colin to give us his presentation, and as he comes to the stage, please give him some encouragement and show your appreciation in the usual way. Thank you, Colin.
As Bruce says, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Colin Cox. I'm the Director of Public Health for Cumbria, and it is a real pleasure to be here talking to you today. Thank you, Bruce. I have to say, I say on my little bio I got there that I'm much less distinguished than Sir Muir. The list of things that Muir has done in his career is absolutely phenomenal. I have to say, I think my team keep doing this thing deliberately. The last time I spoke to an audience of this sort of size, I had on the screen next to me Professor Sir Michael Marmot, who's another massive dian of public health, a great public health hero. So it's a real privilege to be able to talk alongside these sort of people who have done so much for public health and for tackling health inequalities over the years. I'm sure my team does this to me just to make sure that I know my place. But Muir's presentation was absolutely inspirational, so I really very, very much welcome it. Just reflecting on Alex's introduction to this, you talked about the key question that you ask yourself being, can I still do the things that I did 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago? Just a small story from me about active aging. A couple of years back, I was playing squash with a friend of mine. And we've both been playing squash for quite a long time. Not very good at it, but we're fine. It's a good workout. And there was one point, about 20 minutes into the game, where he went for a shot and he missed it. And he just looked at me and he said, 10 years ago. 5 minutes later, he went for another shot, and he missed that one too, but it was a bit of a trickier shot. And he looked at me and he said, 20 years ago. And 5 minutes after that, I went for a shot that I should really have got, and I missed it. And I looked at him and I said, 20 minutes ago. That's absolutely right. You change what you're doing, and you develop your skills, and you can still actively age, but it's still hard. I also just thought it was worth just reflecting on. You had the slide up there showing the Queen. Many years back, I was at a conference at which Professor Marmot was speaking. And alongside him on the platform was Professor Sir Donald Aitchison, who is not such a well-known name these days as Michael Marmot, but he was part of Michael Marmot's team. He had written a report into health inequalities in the UK, and he had been knighted for his services to tackling health inequalities. And Michael told a story on the stage of how before Donald was going up to get his knighthood, in their team they'd been having this conversation around this knighthood experience and what that was going to be like. And they had a conversation around, what do you say if the Queen says to you, so Sir Donald, what exactly are health inequalities? And they thought through, how do you give a very simple answer to that in a single soundbite, and what they came up with was, your mother is 96, Mum. So just reflecting there, what Muir said, you need a bit of luck. And you don't just need to be born to wealthy parents, but it's not just luck. Health inequalities are driven by social structures. And I'm here today, the bit on your agenda says I'm going to talk about tackling health inequalities for older people in Cumbria. So I guess that what I should be doing is tell you what those health inequalities are and talking through how you go about challenging those. And I'll get to some of that. But I do want to put this first in a kind of frame of the importance of this work, the overall picture for healthy ageing in society, and the importance of this work to our society and to our economy. And I suppose the overarching message from me in some of this is not only can we do all of this sort of work, we must do all of this sort of work, and a lot more besides. Because I'm sure it won't have escaped your notice that we have a few challenges in the country at the moment. We've got an economy that is almost certainly in recession. We've got a health and care system that seems to be in perpetual crisis. The NHS is the most visible bit of that, because people waiting to get into A&E in ambulances backed up, and people in corridors in hospitals are much more visible. And some of that's absolutely real. It's not all a kind of media fantasy or media exaggeration. There are many hospitals in the region who now have in their drop-down menus about where to find a patient an option to select corridor, because it's now such a common thing. But a lot of the NHS crisis that we've got is actually driven by the crisis that we've got in social care. We've got hundreds of people in this county who are currently in hospital when they don't clinically need to be there because they're waiting for packages of care that our social care colleagues cannot get for love nor money. It's not for want of trying. There's a workforce challenge that is driving the social care challenge as well. And we've also got a challenge nationally around pensions. And you often see things like this described as a pensions time bomb. In the headlines you'll see a social care time bomb. This is a language that is really used an awful lot in this sort of world. Do you want to challenge some of that a little bit? But when you look through your health crisis, your social care crisis, your pensions time bomb, all of these things, and you start to dig under what's causing that, there seems to be some sort of underlying common themes, some sort of underlying narrative about what that is. And just as a slight aside, it's not NHS pen pushers. I'm sorry about this slide. This is a total distraction, but I'm really, really cross about it. And I wanted to vent speed a little bit, but I had the opportunity. This was the Sunday Mail this week. Bonfire of the NHS pen pushers. The NHS in this country is somewhere between exceptionally efficient and considerably under-resourced when it comes to NHS management. And no amount of cutting management has ever made it better. Indeed, quite often the opposite. So, if you're sitting in here and you're an NHS manager and you saw this headline on Sunday, go you, ignore the Mail, we've got your back. And if you've got any question about the relevance of the Mail to today's world and today's society, I refer you to the headline above the NHS pen pushers one. What are we doing here again? Honestly. Sorry. As I was saying, there is a common theme to some of this stuff. And it's, of course, older people, who, as you know, are all crook-backed, frail, a drain on society. There's too many of them. Use services. How dare they use services? And they're draining the economy. They're putting such pressures on our services that we cannot cope. And there's so many of them that the pensions can't keep up. Hence, the pensions time bomb. And that there's a kind of, even when it's not spoken, that stuff underlines the language about things like a time bomb in care. But is it true? Well, there are some elements of it, obviously, that have got some truth to it. If you look here at what's called the old age dependency ratio, which is the ratio of the number of people over the state pension age to the number of people between 16 and state pension age. It is rising. It looks fairly static on this graph. But if you go back to the late 1960s, the ratio was about 200 per 100,000 in the late 60s. It's about 300 per 100,000 now. And the projection is that it's going to go up to 400 per 100,000 in about 35 years' time. Now, allegedly, what that gives you, of course, is a society where fewer and fewer younger people are supporting and propping up an increasingly older population, a growing older population who need these services. And particularly where the pensions payments that younger people are making are not sufficient to pay the pensions that are going to older people. And of course, in Cumbria, we've got what we call a superaging population. We've got nearly a quarter of our population are over the age of 65, compared to about a fifth nationally. So we are an older population here in Cumbria. And that is projected to increase. Our old age dependency ratio in Cumbria is about 40% at the moment, which is what it's projected to be in the UK as a whole in 35 years' time. If you look at the way that the population is growing, it's projected to be about 60% in about 15 years' time. And if we accept the narrative that this is a problem, then oh boy, have we got a problem coming our way in the future. But it's not that simple. And here's one of the reasons that it's not that simple that starts to get us into the question about tackling health inequalities. This map shows Cumbria's lower super output areas, small-scale geographies, by the percentage of the population that is over the age of 65. We've got a huge range in Cumbria of that. Our youngest areas have got about 10% of their population over the age of 65. Our oldest areas have got more than 50% of their population over that sort of age. And the pattern that you see here won't come as a surprise to anybody in this room. You've got younger populations, Carlisle, and down the west coast. A bit of that spread in terms of the east of the Lake District. And you've got older populations, parts of Eden and the central and west lakes. So you might expect, given the impact that ageing has on people's physical abilities, that the people who are limited in their abilities might follow a similar pattern. But they don't. If you look at the maps of people whose day-to-day activities are limited a little, it doesn't follow the same pattern at all. And in fact, it looks like it's maybe slightly tending towards the opposite. And if you look at the map of people who say that their day-to-day activities are limited a lot, that pattern becomes even more clear. It's concentrated now on Carlisle, the coastal strip, and in fact in some of the younger parts of Eden. Or in other words, what you're looking at here looks very similar to a map of deprivation across Cumbria. So as Muir was very keen to stress, what we're seeing is not a problem of aging per se, it's about how we age. And predictably, more affluent people, more affluent areas tends to age better. And like so many of these things, there's a really clear social gradient in it. This graph shows female healthy life expectancy at birth from the most deprived in decile 1 to the least deprived across in decile 10. If we wait till people turn 60 to start to intervene in these things, in the most deprived 10% of the areas that we've got, people will already have been in poor health for 10 years on average. In the least deprived areas, you intervene at 60, they've still already got 10 years of good health ahead of them. This is a real double whammy for more deprived parts of our community. They live fewer years and they live more of them in poor health. So if you want to tackle inequalities, what we need is a programme that is what Michael Marmot would call proportionately universal. So you have services that are available to everybody, and you have interventions that are available to everybody, but they are more available and more actively promoted and more targeted in those areas of greater deprivation. And that the impact that we could have in terms of raising that healthy life expectancy across that gradient is absolutely huge. And there's another implication of that, which shows why the so-called demographic time bomb is not an inevitability. If you look at rates of economic activity, and economic activity is pretty narrowly defined. Broadly speaking, you're economically active if you're in a job or if you're available for and actively looking for a job. So it takes out people who are sort of full-time students or who are just not looking for work or who are retired and not looking for any sort of additional activity. You can do a ratio of those as well. And what you see is that the ratio of people who are economically inactive to the people who are economically active has been dropping over time, which is a really positive thing for our society. And why is that? Well, fundamentally, it's driven by an increase in economic activity of older age groups. You see here the lines in this sort of yellowy green colour and the dark red. Yellowy green is the over 50s and the dark red is the over 60s age group. That amount of economic activity is going up. The two that are falling sharply are the under 25 age groups, and that's largely about more time spent in full-time education. Now, why is that? It's mostly actually driven by women working. Women have seen an increase in their economic activity across every age group over the age of 25, and particularly in the age groups over 50, and within that, it's a particularly strong increase in the age groups that are 60 to 64. Now, some of that's absolutely obvious because during the time period this graph shows that the retirement age for women went up from 60 to 65, so of course there's been an increase in economic activity over there. But what it does show is that demographic time bomb is not inevitable. You can defuse it by enabling people to continue to participate in society. And note that this is a very, very narrow definition of participating in society and economic activity. It doesn't account for all the unpaid work that goes on, particularly by older people, particularly about caring, whether that's about caring for grandchildren so that younger adults can go off to work, or whether it's about caring for partners or others who would otherwise be requiring social care intervention. These things are massive economic boosts to our country, and I do really struggle with the idea that people who are doing that are not economically active. Now, Muir mentions Japan, and Japan is a really instructive example because Japan is years and years ahead of us in terms of that older age gap that we've got. They're taking action, they're a bit concerned about it, but if you look at this, the UK is currently nowhere near the demographic gap that Japan has got. And I showed you the graph earlier that said we could be at a 40% level in 35 years' time. That only takes us to even pretty much a whole working lifetime away. We will not be in the UK in the same position that Japan is today, and Japan has not collapsed. Now, what can we learn from Japan? Actually, quite a lot. But one of the key things that's relevant for this audience is that Japan's social care system has in effect done all the things that Muir was talking about on his slide about Live Longer Better being an integrated health system. They've got a real focus and a long-term focus on giving people purpose, on tackling loneliness and isolation, and on preventing ill health in the first place. So it's absolutely huge, the potential that we've got here. Giving people that sense of purpose is absolutely critical. We need to start to see older people not as a liability, but as an absolute asset to our society. We've got many, many jobs in this county that we cannot fill, that could easily be done by people who are over the age of 60. In fact, when I was getting up this morning, I was hearing on the Today programme the Director of Quality at Halfords was talking about a piece of work that they're now doing, which is actively promoting recruitment of people who have already retired, because they cannot get staff otherwise, sort of focusing on trying to get people in who are already retired. So really, really positive work by them. We must get this right, because if we don't, that demographic time bomb that we've been talking about could well come to pass. So how do we do it? Well, Muir's already showed this slide. We need all the elements of this. I'm not going to cover this in all detail because Muir's touched on some of it, and we've got more time to talk on the tables later on about the way in which we actually take some of this work forward. But it is a major opportunity to be able to start that piece of work. The thing about regaining fitness is absolutely critical to it, which is why it's so important that Active Cumbria is taking a leadership role in this. But I also want to stress in particular that the importance of that bit about being positive and changing thinking. We have to challenge the framing of ageing as a problem, and that's why I love the concept of living longer better. It is absolutely a positive, forward-thinking approach. We've got to change the narrative. We've got to change the image of older people. We've got to change the image that older people sometimes have about themselves in order to try to do some of this. There have been many attempts to redesign that absolutely awful road sign warning about older people in the area. I'm not sure anybody's quite nailed it yet, but they're having a good bloody go. And let's try and work with that sort of general principle of it. So I could not be more pleased by the way that we're coming together today. The number of people in this room wanting to make a difference through Live Longer Better is absolutely overwhelming. I'm delighted they're all here. Really proud to be here. We can do this. We must do this. Because no matter how young you are in this audience, it is all of our futures as well. Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rage at close of day, and for many, many years before it too. Thank you, and vive la révolution.
Thank you ever so much, Colin, for your presentation. I think you've emphasised the challenge that we have as a county with our super-aging population and tackling those health inequalities for our older adults. But thank you also for the reinforcement of Live Longer Better perhaps being a really good solution to many of those challenges and issues that we face as a county moving forward. Well, you'll be pleased to hear that we won't lose Colin in the next 30 seconds, so he is around for a few more minutes, and I have got a few minutes available before we do go into a break to take any questions. So again, as with before, if you raise your hand for a question. Oh, Emma, you're going to maybe ask the same question, are you? But go.
Sarah's got a question answered, Bruce.
Perfect.
Colin, you can answer the one before, but actually I've got a different one, and it's around intergenerational activities. So you've already alluded to the negative media around our ageing population, which is actually a positive. I see it as a massive positive. Older people have got a lot of skills and experience to bring, but how, as a council, when we're looking to the future and we're delivering our services, do we really push that intergenerational activities and working with schools, youth clubs? How do we get those activities, in the community? Because I know we touched on bits and pieces, but I think this should be really the top of our agenda.
Yeah, thanks, Emma. And I will touch on the question that you asked earlier as well, if that's okay, because you were asking about activity in care homes. And you're absolutely right, of course, in what you were saying then, that there is a real risk that people go into care and then deteriorate further because they don't have the same sort of levels of activity that they might have done. There is work that can be done about that, and Active Cumbria has been really positive in that, in terms of supporting care homes, using training and development for care home staff to help them to work with older people through even for things like share-based exercises and other programs of work, and actually designing and developing programs of work that enable people to be more physically active within a care setting. It is about what you can do in whatever setting you're in, but you can do things even within that sort of care setting. And as I say, we've got a program of that that Active Cumbria has been really supportive of. But in terms of the second question that you just picked up on, in terms of the intergenerational work, again, I think that's hugely important because the image that older people have is partly defined by the relationship they have with younger people. And that is changed and manipulated through the media. The more we can bring older people and younger people together, the more people start to see that older people have some negative images of younger people and younger people have negative images of older people, and you challenge that only by bringing them together. And there's so many opportunities for it. Community activities of various forms can do all of that. There are opportunities around linking older age populations with things like childcare, organised childcare. We've got a crisis of childcare in this country as well. We could be doing many, many more things on that. It's not easy, but if we keep that in mind as a principle for designing services in future, there are certainly more opportunities to take.
Thank you, Emma. Neil has a hand raised. If you just introduce yourself, Neil, as well, please. Thank you.
I'm another councillor, I'm afraid. Anybody else wanting to ask anything? So, Neil Hughes, I'm from Westland, working from the new Westland furnace. So, thanks, Colin, and other speakers too. I just wondered how would you suggest we encourage people, especially old people, to have the confidence to go out and socialise again in the way they did before the pandemic? Because strenuous efforts are being made, obviously, and well done to everyone trying to develop this sort of thing. But I've noticed that community events are far less well attended even now than they were 2019.
Thank you, Neil. That's a really important question, because there's no doubt that there are still people who are scared out there. And you can understand why. We've had 2.5 or 3 years nearly of a pandemic in which there have been dire warnings about the potential impact on older people. I think we do need to start to reflect that COVID may not have gone away, but it has just become part of the fabric of life that we are living with. People who are still vulnerable to COVID, and they are, some people are still vulnerable to COVID, much less so if they've been vaccinated. But they're also the people who would have been vulnerable to flu in previous years. And the potential risk of flu didn't stop a huge number of people from going out and participating in society. It might have done for some who genuinely felt they were vulnerable and took action appropriately. Their call, their choice. But I do think that we're moving into this space now where, for a lot of people, the risk of isolation is considerably greater than the risk from COVID. And so it's really important that we do try to get some of that message across. So thank you.
Thank you, Neil. We've still got time for another 1 or 2 questions. If we've got any hands raised, who's going to be brave? Oh, and Julie is going for a second bite of the cherry. Kelly will be coming to you with a mic.
Yeah, I think I found my soulmate in Emma Williamson. So, hi, Colin.
Hi, Julian.
Yeah, we're actually delivering something really unique into 4 care homes in Carlisle around physical fitness and empowering the actual people in the care home to take onus themselves and deliver it themselves. Sorry, and intergenerational, sorry. I have my partner here. She keeps me under control sometimes. I want to know why we now have somebody that's actually helping us deliver it who's 108, so it's clearly working what we're doing. Why don't we get support as a smaller provider to be able to go into all the care homes?
And why, we've just got 2 people sitting in this room asking exactly the same question. This isn't an attack on Active Cumbria, but they fund the project. Why isn't this out there? You've just talked about this being a priority. Well, we're doing it. Why don't people know?
I don't think I can answer why people don't know, but I think you've also just slightly answered the first question about funding of the project. That project is being funded. through Active Cumbria. We'd love to be able to do more. I refer you back to the challenge of some of the economic crisis that we've got. We are looking at budget reductions across the board for local authorities. We keep talking, Julia, as we have done, and we'd love to support you to do more of that and to roll these things out. We do need to see what the budget settlements start to look like. We're expecting them, believe it or not, 21st of December, I think we're expecting the overall council budget settlement. If history is anything to judge by, we'll probably get the public health grant allocation on about the 15th of March. So not very much time to plan before the new financial year, but we will keep talking to you on these things because it's good to fun.
Thank you, Julia and Lisa, for that question and raising that important point. And I think on that question as well, Julia, you prick your ears up for a later session that Claire will cover, where we're launching our reconditioning fund, which will go a long way to be helping to address that. But fundamentally, this revolution is about seeing a shift in where the investments are supported. And we do need to see a revolution taking place, both in social care, but also in primary and acute services as well, and look further upstream at population health and prevention agendas. I think we have our next question already primed. If you'd like to introduce yourself and where you're from, and then ask your question. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sarah Jackson. I'm the founding director for Information Advice and Fitness CIC. We were just registered in March 21. We recently got our first funding in September to deliver 3 6-week projects, one of which is postural stability exercises for people at risk of falls and who have different medical conditions. Now, I found it quite hard to be able to link into the NHS for a reason I won't go into. However, I've been told if we could get commissioned or be contracted by the council, that would be easier for us to do. And I'm just wondering how it can be made so it's easy to find out how to do that. So, you know, if there's something that can be promoted for new organisations that come up, or how we can get contracted by the council or by the NHS.
It sounds like you're hitting bureaucratic obstacles, which unfortunately both local governments and the NHS is exceptionally good at creating for reasons that I don't quite understand. There's always opportunities around funding, and again, Active Cumbria is really good at putting information out about funding opportunities. In terms of longer term mainstream stuff, come and talk to me. Find me at the break, we'll have a chat.
Thank you for that question. And again, just on that point, today is about trying to break down some of those bureaucratic barriers. You know, you have got individuals from our integrated care communities, from our integrated care partnerships, and we're bringing providers and health partners together to get the conversations going. And quite often, the relationships don't need to be just developed on a contractual or a commission footprint. We know that there are some really good examples of where there are strong relationships with a physical activity provider and health professionals, where there is this signposting and a pathway, albeit informal, that is signposting and creating that pathway for patients to come to those activities. So that's what we want to develop through these conversations. You're going to come back to me with another point.
Yeah, there's certain circumstances that I'll talk to Colin Cox about that you can't actually do that in, and that's where we're hitting it. So I'll explain later. Okay,
thank you. Anna, I think someone's ready for it. Again, name and an organisation that you're from, please, sir.
Alan Bell from West Ledges with Air. I was interested to know that you're doing something in 4 care homes in Carlisle. Is it possible to do something in 50 care homes in Cumbria by Zoom? Because our local care home couldn't accept any Zoom calls that we were organising. And I just wondered, is that a way forward partially to answer some of these questions?
It might be. I think I'll actually ask Julia to answer that, because the people who are doing this work are much better at answering the detail of that sort of thing than I am. My guess is there is stuff that you could do by Zoom, but actually being present and working with the staff and training up the staff to do things within their own care homes is probably a better way forward. But Julia, do you want to think of an answer to that.
Hi, I'm Rue, and I work in the Eden area with my lovely friend Rhiannon and Zeke from Eden District Council, and we have an organisation, community-based, called Fit for All, and we go out into rural communities, into village halls, and we get people of all ages with a huge variety of conditions, not even conditions, people who are isolated, people who are lonely, come along, and I have to say the sociability of the groups is actually probably the reason that the one reason that people come out. Yeah, we get to do some exercise, we get to do some relaxation, we get to do some conditioning, mobility. We try and follow the 4S's that Sir John was talking about as well. But we also deliver Zoom twice a week, free. The Zoom aspect has been absolutely life-saving through lockdown, and the 60 plus getting access to the internet, to Zoom, it can be done, you just have to be really forceful about it. A lot of people are frightened of technology and oh gosh, it's the devil's work, people can see it in the house. Some of the things I've heard have been quite amusing really, but it's quite real for a lot of people, you know, and accessing that kind of thing is a brand new phenomenon for a lot of people. Using cashless payments is a new phenomenon for a lot of people. So imagine what it must be like to turn on the screen and go, oh hello, I can exercise here as well. Nothing is impossible. We are pushing the limits all the time, all the way. And I just think that everyone just needs to jump on board with it all. And I realise there are barriers, there's blockages. But through the summer we have had access to so many people. We've had intergenerational aquafit sessions in the outdoor pools in the communities. We're just about to launch Boccia with the help of Active Cumbria in the Lazenby area for people that are disabled or have additional health needs. So if you want to do it, do it.
Great, thank you for that. Oh.
I was just going to say, I work for the NHS and Rue works with council, so there is ways that they can work together, but I have my own barriers within the NHS and different calls things as well. I think there's barriers wherever we are, but it's great to meet with people and celebrate what we do and we can achieve. You know, on our caseload there's 24 to 95-year-olds, that's the spread that we get. But again, it's funding and it's support for training, and it's those things that we would like more support with to help push things forward.
That's great to hear. Thank you very much for that. And as I say, when Claire comes to talk to you about launching the reconditioning fund, that presents us with an immediate opportunity to address some of these issues. We're aware as Active Cumbria, as the strategic leads for physical activity across the Cumbria, we're so aware of great work that is taking place locally. And it's more importantly about getting that connections, getting that offer, and getting it to the health professionals so we can then help with that connectivity and signposting of patients to refer into these activities and programs. So we want to build on that, but let's get into that for some of the next session. Colin, I think we have run out of time with you now, but thank you ever so much for your presentation. And thank you very much.